Hello everyone, Harry Baldock here, editor at Total Telecom, and I'd like to start by asking you a question. Just how smart is your home? With the number of connected devices in all our homes set to increase enormously over the next few years, the smart home market is gaining value fast. The question is, can the operators capitalise on this growth? I'm delighted to be joined today by Tyson Marian, Chief Commercial Officer of the smart home specialist Plume Design, who's going to discuss some of the challenges that the operators are facing right now, as well as some of the potential solutions. Tyson, thank you very much for joining me today.
Love the topic, so really glad to be here.
The smart home market is growing rapidly and is understandably gaining a lot of attention from major players around the world, including the likes of Amazon and Google. Is there a real risk of CSPs being outpaced by big tech companies?
Good question. I'm kind of a data and a history guy, and I like to look at history of the industry and ultimately what has been successful for the cable and telco or the service provider industry, and what we've seen from a competitive standpoint from big tech. If you look back decades and decades, our industry has been very happy selling a bundle of services. Voice, video, and data is kind of the bread and butter. A lot of them added home, which was really primarily physical security and mobile. And they did this because they loved the bundle. The bundle they love not necessarily because it generates more incremental revenue for the service provider, but mainly because what we've found in this industry is that the more products the customer has, the less likely they are to churn. And while their incremental revenue from a bundle is fantastic, the cost to serve those bundles have been increasing. For instance, in video, programming rights have increased dramatically, compressing margins. But churn, on the other side of the ledger, if you will, is by far the most expensive cost to the service provider. So the bundle really helps drive down that cost of churn. And when you think about that bundle, voice has been attacked, and it's been attacked for a number of years. And it's almost as if it wasn't necessarily a conscious thing to attack voice from a big tech perspective. The way that we communicate today, the way that we consume video or consume anything is really from an on-demand perspective. As a society, we want things and we want it now. And when you look at how that translates into serving these bundles of services, these are communication vehicles. So when you look at voice, fixed lines, people aren't buying fixed lines anymore just because they don't want to pay for it. It's just that's not the way we communicate today. We communicate through things like Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it might be, text, Slack. Those are all driven by the cloud. And this cloud component I'll talk about in a moment is very important. Video, same thing. Video was attacked by big tech by adding things like DVR recommendations, dynamic search, natural language to the voice remote. Those things are all driven by the cloud. And so when you think about this industry didn't grow up in the cloud. Really, big tech has grown up in the cloud. So that concentration of engineering might and thought leadership has really come from big tech. It hasn't been as prevalent and isn't as prevalent in the service provider industry. The second thing, I think, from the service provider's perspective that we need to look at is how well do they partner with other companies. If they don't have these resources, they're not on the forefront of cloud and delivering new cloud-driven services. It's going to be quite tough for them to do so. The other way you can approach it is through acquisition. And if you look at big tech has been very big in acquisitions to capture some of these services and this talent. Whereas in the service provider industry, it's typically about buying more homes passed, if you will, right? It's about buying territory. So it's a very different approach from a smart home perspective. The smart home will be won digitally, not with physical devices like the Nest thermostat or the Sonos speaker or anything like that. It's going to be about the data and what you can ultimately leverage from that data from the cloud. So really, are the service providers at risk of losing in the smart home? 100%. They have a significant advantage over everybody. And they know this, and that's the gateway in the home, and that every single packet travels over their infrastructure. So they can take advantage of it, if they're able to capture, organize, publish that data, and leverage it for an intelligent purpose. So I think they're at risk for sure. Some of it is just natural reasons why, but can be overcome through things like partnerships, acquisition opportunities, things of that nature for sure.
Do you think the coronavirus pandemic has changed the smart home market in a significant way? Is the market accelerating more rapidly than before?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is accelerating things quite a bit more. We're all doing a lot more in our homes, more than we ever thought we would. If you think about the typical week for anybody who works, it was you go into the office and maybe one day of the week we would work from home. That paradigm, I believe, has shifted and has done a complete 180, and that it'll be different. I think the majority of people will work from home and go into the office maybe once or twice. What that means, and by the way, I've talked to a lot of folks, not only in the service provider industry, but outside of the service provider industry, and they've all determined that, yep, people can be just as productive, if not more productive, working from home. What that really means is that people are consuming more services. There's a much greater strain on the infrastructure, that the internet and the Wi-Fi infrastructure itself. And so there's more services being consumed, but then there's just less time for people, and they're bringing in more devices into their home to do things like, exercise, Peloton. If you look at Plume actually has done a study across its 24 million or so active households. And what we found was that of all the new devices coming into the homes, first, we've seen an increase in the total number of devices. Second, the category that has increased has been fitness and health devices. And then, beyond that, what we've seen is that there's more consumption, whether it's a fitness device, a recreational listening device, or whatever it might be. There is just much more load on the system. And coronavirus, and the pandemic just accelerated what we all thought was coming, which was more devices in the home, more consumption in the home, strain on the network. You're going to need to do a much better job. We all are going to need to do a much better job of managing the unlicensed spectrum in that home to ensure the best quality of experience. So yeah, it changed things dramatically for here until the end of time.
What do you consider to be the biggest challenges CSPs face when trying to enter and really capitalize on the smart home market?
I think, it sort of goes back to this cloud concept, and the ability to capture data, I think it is a big deal. The service provider is in the best spot to lead the smart home market because, again, they're capturing the most data inside a home. In fact, all the big tech that we talked about, they're jealous of the service provider. That's why they've tried to get into their space. That relationship that the service provider has built with the customer and the trust they've built is something that it's very real, it's very strong, and big tech likes to try and capture some of that relationship. And it's primarily because the big tech companies know one thing very clearly, and that's that with the gateway inside the home, you have every single packet. You know exactly what's happening inside those homes. And so the service provider's ability to capture that data, to publish it somewhere, organize it for a purpose, and that purpose is going to mean to delight the customer, to provide them a better quality of experience, to give them new experiences. That's what it means to organize that data for a purpose. And if you can do that, what has been proven is that the consumer will be willing to give you more data that enables you to monetize that data in a pretty big way. But the service provider has to start taking advantage of what really is an unfair advantage to them in the smart home market, which is you're capturing all that data. Now, what can you actually do with that data to drive these new cross-device experiences, delight customers, give them peace of mind? I call them freebies. It's things you don't have to think about, but something or somebody just does it for you and you're very delighted and happy with it. this is a data-driven world. The smart home is going to be one with data-driven products. And it's not just directly for the consumer, but it's also for the service provider themselves to ensure, again, that you can provide it the best quality of experience for those consumers. So it's really a data story. It's really about being able to manage that data, and you got to do it from the cloud. And things continue to get further and further away from a tech perspective when you think about what you need to do. You need good machine learning algorithms. You need AI. Those type of things are going to be extremely important. You know, we say that's kind of future thinking, or at least we did 3 years ago. It's sort of here now, and it will just be the norm in another 3 years. And again, when you look at the service provider industry and where they grew up, and I'm not knocking them, they've had a phenomenal business model, but they've never really invested in those cloud resources, those data resources, and that concentration of those has always been in big tech. So they have an ability to pull it over because they have these massive amounts of data, and data scientists love massive amounts of data because you can run these algorithms and get really good and accurate learnings from big amounts of data. So I think you can pull in a lot of those folks. It's just going to have to be a shift in mindset as to really what needs to be done and how willing the service provider is going to be to opening up and bringing new partners in and just dealing with their folks, their vendors and their partners in a different way.
You recently published a total cost of ownership study about your consumer experience management platform. What would you say are the key findings from this study, and where is it that CSPs can make the biggest savings?
You know, there's really two sides to the coin for the CSP, and you know, the funny thing is you rarely see products and services that can impact both the revenue side of the ledger and the expense side of the ledger. So it's hard to just talk about total cost of ownership without talking about the revenue side. Cost is a word inside those, you know, in TCO, but you really got to think about the revenue side. And what we've seen historically is that so long as you continue to give your customers more value, they're more than happy to actually pay you for that value. And you know, in this industry, we've seen the internet service really in all of the marketing around it and the capture of new subscribers really be built around this story of speed. That's just not going to work long term. In fact, I'm not sure why the service provider industry doesn't really start thinking about more of a, hey, we're going to charge you based on a smart home experience. You just tell me what services you want, what quality of experience you want. Don't worry about the speed. If you want to watch Netflix and you want to watch Hulu at the same time in parallel in 2 different rooms, and you have a bunch of Nest cameras on the outside of your house, don't worry about it. We'll take care of you. You don't need a gig speed for that. So giving them a new path to market, if you will, is very important, because if you can give them that path to market, the customer will be willing to pay you more money for it. They will need to see value. So how do you justify increases in fees? Well, the way you do it is by providing new services. The other way that helps you tremendously is what we've actually seen at Plume is that when Plume is inside of a home, and the majority of our deployments, those 24 million active households, are single access point homes, that we've seen a 30% reduction in churn. And it's because of the quality of experience. And so starting to move toward the expense side of the ledger, your total cost of ownership really, you can drive new revenue with this path to market we call it Home Pass. But on the other side of the ledger, the system is working for you. The adaptive Wi-Fi is working for you, giving you a better quality of experience. And what we found again is that based on all the things that we optimize inside of a home, the consumer's quality of experience is better. Meaning if they want to stream Netflix and Hulu side by side in 2 different rooms and have a bunch of Nest cams and somebody's on a Peloton in the basement, they can all enjoy a flawless experience. So they're happy with that. And that reduces churn. And hopefully what they've done, given that they've got a bunch of these new devices in their home, is that their service provider has drop shipped them a pack of Plume devices or a device, and ultimately it was self-install. So when you start thinking about the reduction in churn, because you have happier customers, the cost of installation going away, or at least reducing, even in the case of a professional install, because it's just so easy to set up, you start building up these costs. And then what we've also seen is about 80% of a broadband base calls a service provider every year. And those are Wi-Fi and internet related calls. And Plume inside the home, given all of the things that we do to optimize that home, we reduce 50% of those calls from coming in. They just never show up anymore. About 19% of those calls turn into truck rolls, and we ground about 2/3 of those trucks. So those expenses, when you start taking a look at the reduction in churn, the savings in operational improvements, and also that you have higher NPS scores, our NPS scores typically range around 60 points, you get this super happy customer on one side of the equation that's willing to pay you with this path to market we call Home Pass on the other side. And by the way, all of that operational stuff for the service provider, we call Haystack. It's a suite of services and workflow automation tools for the service provider. Those suites combined together provide this tremendous value for the CSP that we think, quite honestly, it's table stakes in the industry. Unless you have these services and this path to market, and then on the other side, the tools necessary to really give personalized, bespoke customer care, you're not going to win in this market. Those who do decide to jump on that train, they're going to win. There's no question in my mind they're going to win, and we're seeing it in our own data. We're seeing people shift into service providers who have those smart home services. We also see that service providers can charge about 40% more per 100 megabits delivered with these digital smart home services. I'll repeat that again. Service providers that don't have any smart home services serving 100 megabits, right? Same bits and bytes that a service provider with these smart home services sells. The one with the smart home services can charge 40% more per megabyte delivered. So there is tremendous value, and the customers are paying for it. So, all of that combined from a TCO experience, we think is pretty tremendous for our customer base. We're really happy to deliver that.
You've already touched on this a little bit, but what impact are you seeing from the CEM platform in terms of improvements to customer experience itself?
Let me give you a specific example, because I think this one resonates and hits home for a lot of folks. One of my favorite things that has happened in my days here at Plume. I walked into a tier one, a very large CSP, and I was speaking with the CEO, and we were talking about this TCO and what Plume could deliver. And he said, I'm not sure, on the operational side whether or not you guys can really help us. And I said, okay. I said, do me a favor. Just give me 20 or 30 of your calls, randomly selected calls. And he said, okay, I'll give you 20 or 30 of your randomly selected calls. And I was asking for that because I wanted to show ultimately what the Plume experience would be like versus what they currently have. So I sat back and I listened to every single one of these calls. And about 2 weeks later, I walked in and I heard a pretty amazing call. And I said, I'm going to play you this call. And then I'm going to talk to you about the experience you would have with Plume. And I set up a demo, basically a demo home so that you can see it was set up exactly the same way, at least that we heard that same caller's house was set up. So the call comes in and the tier one support rep answers the phone and says, hi, what's your name? What's your account number? What's going on? And the customer says, well, my video, it's grainy, it's pixelating, it's pausing. I don't know what's going on with it. Tier one rep says, yep, I can definitely help you. So about 15 minutes goes by and tier one rep can't help. Says, sorry, sir, I'm really sorry about this, but I'm going to transfer you to a video specialist that can help you. I'm sure they can figure out your issue. Customer gets transferred. What's your name? What's your account number? What's going on? Video is grainy, pixelating. About another 15, 20 minutes goes by and the video specialist cannot figure it out. I'm sorry, sir, I can't figure out the issue here, but we have tier 3 support, engineering focus, very technical. They're going to figure out this problem for you. So transfer this poor customer. What's your name? What's your account number? What's your issue? Right? Same stuff. And about minute 58 rolls in and the customer says something really interesting. Customer says, you know, these darn Apple products never worked. I saw this ad for this new Apple TV show. I just wanted to watch this show. And the support rep says, wait a minute here. You don't have our branded video service? Well, no, sir, it's my Apple TV. Okay, so look, this is probably, so the rep says, okay, this is probably not a video issue. It's probably a broadband or a Wi-Fi issue. And the customer support, and the customer says something even more interesting. Yeah, you know, my wife got on this Zoom call and, you know, it just, the Wi-Fi wasn't working so well. So I switched to my T-Mobile hotspot. And the tier 3 rep says, wait a minute here. Are you kidding me? So you're telling me you don't have our video service. You're not on our Wi-Fi. Sir, I got to tell you, you know, why are you calling me? It's not really our issue. He says, I just wanted to watch this TV in my den and, you know, the service isn't working. And, you know, again, you know, not the video service, not the Wi-Fi. So we stopped there. I played that for the CEO. He says, that's pretty amazing. But here's what was even more amazing. Then I pull up the Plume backend tools. I had set up this with the help of our technical team. We set up this demo house that basically had sort of the same setup. And then I brought it up on screen. I said, now let me explain to you how this call would have went had they called Plume or called you with the Plume service, and they could have seen all this visibility in these backend tools. Call would have come in. Hi, sir, what's your name? What's your account number? What's the issue? I've got this video problem. Great. Well, I can see, I don't see that you have our video product, but I do see that you have an Apple TV and a Samsung TV. They're not connected, but is it one of those devices? Well, yes, it's my Apple TV. Great. Well, it doesn't look like it's connected to our Wi-Fi network or to your Wi-Fi network. And the customer said, yeah, I moved it to my T-Mobile hotspot. I went into the back in the den. That's where I like to watch TV. Okay, well, why don't we try and get it connected to your Wi-Fi? Well, I'll try, but I'm back in my den and that den doesn't typically get good service, but I'm going to try and connect it. So it connects. Yeah, sir, I can actually see that is that den quite far? Yes, I have a ranch home. It's quite far on the other side of the house. Well, great. Here's what we can do. We're going to fix your problem here. Now that you're connected to Wi-Fi, that's great. We have these devices. They're called, you know, pods, and we can ship you one of those for an additional $5 a month. You're going to have phenomenal service in that den where you like to watch TV. Are you okay with that? Well, yeah, I'm okay with that. You just turned a $100 cost call, right, with a poor customer experience into a incremental $5 in ARPU with a very happy customer, all in the span of about 10 minutes. So those are the kind of impacts that we're seeing with our CEM platform, is that it's driving revenue, giving a better customer experience, and it's empowering that rep. Think about 3 reps in line that can't solve the problem. They're probably not too happy about that. And quite honestly, they get bonused on being successful. And when they don't have first call resolution, they're not successful, they don't get paid. So Plume thinks very deeply about corporate goals down to how people get bonus. And the reason we can do that is a lot of us came from the service provider industry. We were operators. So when we wake up every day and go to bed every night, we're thinking about how do you solve problems in the industry to create a better customer experience. And I like to think about it down to how do people get paid and bonus. And if I can help, you know, if Plume together can help actually impact those metrics that people get paid on, they're going to be very, very happy. And those metrics are there because it typically drives a particular result that the service provider wants, like better quality of experience, right? Better NPS and those sorts of things. So those are sorts of the impacts that we're seeing with our CEM platform across the base.
I guess my last question for you, Tyson, is how do business models need to change for CSPs to really take the lead in this market?
That's a great question. I kind of have 2 parts to that. So one is the CSP, again, has to be willing to open up and partner with folks who do have a concentration of resources that understand how to drive these new experiences. From a business model perspective, there's really 2 ways you can go about it. It's sort of out there, maybe this one's further out, but I kind of mentioned it, which is you sell a smart home service, right? And that smart home service comes with broadband. Now, again, the consumer doesn't need to know whether or not they're getting 1 gig or 2 gigs. It doesn't really matter to them. They care about application load. And that poor customer we talked about, they care about being able to consume their video in the den while their wife is on a Zoom call. That's what they ultimately care about. They don't know the difference between 750 megs and 500 and what the performance is like at all. So you could sell a smart home service bundle and probably sell 150 meg speeds across the board and basically rep to a particular quality of experience. And the customer would be quite happy with that. And I think you could charge more for that as a packet of services. So that's one example of a business model that might help. Again, it's a different way of looking at things, but it's a unique way that I think could capture a lot more in the market. The second is really to focus on incremental enhancements and improvements. If you look at how everybody jumped into the smart home market about 4 or 5 years ago, it was from a hardware perspective. It was all about what thermostat was going in. Did you have a Chamberlain garage door opener or an August lock at the time? It was those things. And those things are quite expensive to the service provider because they have to warehouse those things. It creates more calls because sometimes those devices don't work. When you don't have a good Wi-Fi system, they definitely don't work. And I actually think that the smart home is all about digital. So if you think about the Plume service, we have this app that gives the consumer phenomenal control over their home and more visibility than they've ever had before, peace of mind with cybersecurity, peace of mind with parental controls, sensorless motion detection. These are all 4 of these things. These are all digitally focused. Plume's also working on things related to healthcare and remote patient monitoring as another service. And those are all digital services. So there's no warehousing cost there. There's no physical cost, and there's no cost for professional install of those things. So when you think about how everybody's approached the smart home market in the service provider space, I got to have some sort of physical security thing with cameras and sensors and thermostats and all this stuff. Maybe the consumer is going to go out and buy those things on their own. Now it's going to be a question of what you can do with the data that those things produce. And in a lot of the cases with Plume, you don't even need those pieces of hardware. There's plenty of data for you to drive additional value for the consumer. So I think a business model for these folks is really to focus on the broadband service and building that bundle of new digital services around it. And then when you think of monetizing it, yeah, if you want to still talk about speeds and stuff, that's fine. But you can increase we've seen it quite successfully where folks used to have a 25, 50, and 75 meg offer, for instance, that was 29, 39, and 49. Everybody's just gone say it's now 39, 49, and 59. And with it, you get this smart home bundle of services. So you increased across the board. You're not trying to push mix or do anything. You're just saying, look, across the board, this helps me on my ops side of the house on the back end. But I'm showing you value, Mrs. Customer. And are you willing to give me $10 a month for that value? And they say, better Wi-Fi, and I'm working from home. You're going to keep me safe on my network. You're going to give me control to make sure my kids are safe and I get peace of mind. And I've got sensorless motion for a lot of unique use cases. It doesn't have to be physical security. It's not necessarily a replacement for that. But even my kids, they've got their own playroom over there. They're supposed to stay there. They're 3 and 4 years old. I just want to know if they walk out of that room. That's all I want to know. That's all digital. So you can increase again across the board. And we've seen our customers do that quite dramatically, or you can just stop selling on speeds, just sell a smart home service. So to me, those are, yes, the business models have to change. And the service providers have to be open to folks who can come in and help them drive value from the cloud. I think those are 2 very important factors. And again, incremental enhancements. You don't have to go and build a whole new security business. Just start building these nice digital services around the beacon of light right now, which is broadband. I think you'll do extremely well over the next decade.
Tyson, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.